Well, the European Commission says around 10,000 EU citizens will be evacuated from Libya, while Turkey, which has 25,000 citizens in Libya, is mounting its biggest evacuation operation in history. Foreign nationals who've already managed to return to their home countries have been speaking about their relief. Niamh Barker reports.
Touching down in Tripoli, a French military plane arrives to evacuate foreign citizens stranded in Libya. Several nations have organised emergency flights.
We're taking every action to get the remaining British nationals in Libya out of harm's way. We're greatly concerned about the loss of life in Libya and their government's failure to protect its own people. Indeed, the behaviour of their government in launching attacks on their own people.
Plane loads of passengers are now returning to cities across the continent. At Frankfurt Airport in Germany, evacuees expressed their relief at being out of Libya. With ordinary commercial flights hit by cancellations, many describe the scene at Tripoli's main airport as desperate.
Today in the airport was an absolute chaos. Many people from North Africa trying to leave and get home, thousands, and that was it.
For many, the island of Malta has become the nearest safe destination for those fleeing the violence. More than 500 Russians are also on their way home, many of them specialists working in the oil and construction industries. They bring with them eyewitness accounts of the turmoil.
At night, they would sometimes shoot a lot. We wanted to leave in the morning, but there was a huge crowd, so we flew out at night.
Like many Western powers, Russia has been keen to establish a foothold in Libya. But as the nation descends into chaos, the only option left is to flee. Niamh Barker, AlJazeera, Moscow.
Well, from Europe to the US now, which is considering freezing Gaddafi's assets in response to the crackdown in Libya. Let's take you to Nick Clark, who's in our Washington Broadcast Centre for more. Nick.
Yeah, thanks, Felicity. It's a difficult balancing act for the administration between what limited leverage they have and backing up their principles with action. The Obama administration says it's also considering sanctions.
The President strongly condemns and condemned in a statement on Friday the violence, the bloodshed perpetrated by the Libyan government in Libya. The Secretary of State has strongly condemned what's happened in Libya. The President will be meeting with Secretary Clinton, his regular meeting with the Secretary of State this afternoon. We will have some announcements out of that meeting. The President will address this issue either later this afternoon or tomorrow. So you will hear from the President relatively soon on Libya. But let me step back and again make the point that this administration has very strongly condemned what's happened in Libya. The violence is abhorrent. It is completely unacceptable. And the bloodshed must stop.
Well, let's speak to Patty Culhane joining us now from the White House. Patty, considering a range of potential precautions and issues, including sanctions, and it seems we're going to hear from the President finally.
We are going to hear from the President, the White House saying that he's going to have a meeting this afternoon with Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. After that, he could come out and make a statement on camera. If not tonight, it will be Thursday, U.S. time, as to what could make the difference between either tonight or tomorrow. They're saying it's simply a scheduling issue. That's at least the official line they're going with here at the White House. We do know that we're going to probably hear something from Secretary of State Hillary Clinton within the hour. She's expected to address the cameras, will likely be asked about Libya. But you know, in this briefing, the press secretary has been pressed very hard on why the administration has waited so many days to make a statement on Libya. And you just heard it, Jay Carney, the spokesman, pointing back to Friday. That's when the president put out a written statement. In that statement, I want to point out, he included Bahrain and Yemen as well. In the cases of Bahrain and Yemen, the president has actually picked up the phone and made calls to those leaders. So far, Jay Carney hasn't been asked about that difference. Now, behind the scenes, what officials were saying, and we heard this on camera from Hillary Clinton yesterday, saying that our first concern is for the safety of Americans in Libya. Behind the scenes, officials were putting out the statement that they were really worried if they pushed Colonel Gaddafi too hard that he would take the Americans hostage. After all, there were family members and non-essential employees that had been pulled out of Libya but hadn't been able to get out of the country. We're now told that they are on the ferry, that they should be leaving within the hour. So does that have anything to do with why the president's now going to speak out? Well, they're not actually saying that that was the reason they haven't.
Right, talking of behind the scenes, what actually goes on? Give us an insight into who meets and what happens in times of crises like this. Issues of military deployment must be being discussed after all.
Well, actually, I've been talking to sources within the Pentagon, and they say they have not been put on standby to help without any sort of evacuations, and they aren't looking at plans for a no-fly zone. As you know, that's been one of the ideas suggested, and the State Department really batted that down today, saying that that is something that would be exceedingly difficult. What happens here at the White House is the president has a national security team. They usually meet in the Situation Room, sometimes in the Oval Office. It's his national security advisor, the secretaries of defense and state. Obviously, his military advisors are there as well as staff, CIA. They sit around and they discuss their potential options. So obviously, you can assume that that's been going on behind the scenes, but all they'll tell us officially here at the White House is that the president's been briefed on the situation.
All right, Patty, leave it there for the moment. More with you when we hear from Hillary Clinton and as the day goes on. Thanks very much. Well, the UN Security Council met a few hours ago, but they didn't talk about Libya. They talked about Korea. Here's what the Chinese ambassador and the British ambassador said as they walked into that meeting.
Mr. Ambassador, any discussion about Libya today at all?
Not today. I've heard about that.
Morning, Mr. Ambassador. Any talk about sanctions on Libya today at all? Anytime soon? Your government was saying that it might be a good idea.
There you go. They weren't saying a lot, all pretty tight-lipped. Let's speak to AlJazeera Scott Heidler at the UN in New York. Scott, as I say, all pretty tight-lipped. There had been talk yesterday, hadn't there, of a third meeting today. What's happened to that?
Yeah, Nick, well, not yet here at the Security Council in the United Nations headquarters in New York. Probably not the next 2 days, actually, is what we're hearing. And someone part of one of the missions in the Security Council telling us that the only action really kind of on the books, if you will, for the United Nations will come on Friday in Geneva. And that's the UN Human Rights Council. There's a draft resolution out there looking for a investigation into the violence in Libya. But that still, it sounds like there's going to be some negotiation over the wording, even with that, even just an investigation, authorizing an investigation in Libya. So nothing really planned here, the Security Council for the next 2 days. And the only thing really coming forward in the next couple of days would be that action in Geneva on Friday.
Scott, it's all very curious, isn't it? Because 3 of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council have said they want more progress. They want more things to be done. But nothing's moving forward at any pace anyway.
No, there's not. And they say those three nations of the 5 permanent members to the Security Council, they say the venue for that, for further action, should be the Security Council. But we're not seeing any more action. It's quite contentious when you come down to the permanent 5 members to actually get anything real done. And I say that, I mean a resolution or sanctions or even something further, say like a no-fly zone. It is so difficult to get the Security Council to agree on one thing. Like for example, on when we had this press statement come out, that took 3 hours just hashing over a 5-paragraph statement just being read to the press condemning what's happening in Libya. You can imagine how long the deliberations would have to take if you're talking about a no-fly zone or any kind of military, UN military action. So that's the reason that we're really not seeing much being pushed forward right now. You hear a lot of